We can go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our seventh and final webinar as part of our Maryland Clean Energy Capacity Building Program. We hope you all have been enjoying these webinars as much as we've been offering them. And we thought it would only make sense to end this series by bringing the conversation back to the people that our organization serve, our residents. So today's webinar is all about engaging residents throughout the clean energy process, why it's important, how you do it, how it can benefit not just the project, but also the community as a whole. As always, the session is going to be recorded, and a copy of the slides, recording, and any other resources will be shared out afterwards. Before I hand it over to our guest speakers, I wanted to share some findings from a community engagement pilot NHT led a couple years ago and how those findings can be applied to resident engagement more broadly. Then we're going to hear from Lauren Westmoreland at SAFE, who will walk us through industry resources to help you get started with engaging your residents around clean energy topics and best practices to help inform your resident engagement strategy. Then we'll hand it over to Christy McMichael and Kim Strom at Community Housing Partners, who will share how their resident survey processes help inform their project scope of work and funding strategies. And finally, we're going to hear from Hayden Cantoni at New Ecology, who will share more of a resident perspective to this work and why it's important to, look beyond just constructing and retrofitting buildings that are energy efficient and meet certain green building standards, but also that we're centering residents and that it's important to the people that's actually living in the communities. So a couple of years ago, NHT was given the opportunity to work with DC's Department of Energy and Environment, or DOEE, to engage low-income residents across the district to help inform an update to DC's climate plan. So DC has a goal of being carbon neutral by 2045. And to meet that goal, the district will need buildings, including multifamily buildings, to transition away from fossil fuel by decarbonizing and electrifying the district's building stock. DOEE recognized that this transition, the updates to the climate plan, and any relevant policies passed would ultimately impact residents across DC. And the department wanted to ensure that whatever policies, plans, or goals they develop create a path of equitable decarbonization for all district residents, but especially those living in low income and disadvantaged communities. So this effort led to the funding of NHT's Equitable Electrification Community Engagement Pilot, where we worked with residents at 3 low-income affordable housing communities in Northwest, Northeast, and Southeast DC. We hosted a number of small group discussions at each community to share more about DC's climate plan, share examples of what electrification and decarbonization
Are you on the PVV call?
in their communities
No,
and their homes, and gave residents the opportunities to share their thoughts, questions, and concerns directly with DOEE staff. I'm not going to go into all the details of our community engagement, but if you're interested in learning more about our approach, I included a link in yesterday's email to a paper that our team wrote for ACEEE summer study last year. But I do want to highlight some of the lessons learned and key findings that we took away from the discussion that we had with residents that would be kind of helpful grounding to think about as you get started or continue your own resident engagement work. So 2 consistent themes that came out of these discussions that probably won't be surprised by, that were brought up by residents were their emphasis on wanting to feel healthy and safe in their homes, and that electricity bills wouldn't go up after electrifying their units. But other themes that residents kept coming back to in these discussions and that were consistent at all the properties we engaged with was the need for ongoing engagement and centering their voices, residents' voices, to ensure equitable results and an equitable decarbonization transition. We are working with residents from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different lived experiences, but we were consistently told that residents wanted an active role in the decision-making process. They also told us that even if they weren't happy with the final decisions that were being made and every piece of their building's electrification and decarbonization process, they at least wanted to be involved in that process. So all this to say, resident engagement is important, especially when making decisions that directly impact our residents' lives and the homes they live in, whether it's a small scale or a large scale engagement. Giving residents the opportunity to provide feedback and help shape a project leads to a much more successful end result, as we've seen in our experiences. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren to share more about industry resources and best practices that you can use to help get you started or enhance your existing engagement strategies.
Thanks, Madeline. I'm Lauren Westmoreland with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future.
And we are, we've been working with several of you around TA, around energy and sustainability. In addition to that work, we also do a lot around resident voice agency and resident services. And some of you may be familiar. We have colleagues who run the CORES program, which really focuses on ensuring organizations have what they need to establish good resident services programs that serve and engage residents in a way that's authentic. So I'm borrowing some from the work that they're doing as I talk about this, in addition to bringing some of the own energy and sustainability resources that we've seen around resident engagement to the table. Madeline, if you can go to the next slide. So this is, and this is, all of the links are in these slides. So when Madeline sends this out, you'll be able to click on all of these things. So this is how our resident services folks have approached us and talked to us about different ways to do resident and community engagement. With all of this, make sure that you're thinking and starting small, but understanding that there's different ways in which you can engage and sort of what it requires you to do versus residents to do and what that looks like. So I like this chart because as we're thinking at the beginning of all of this about engaging residents, especially as utility rates are going up or electrification, like it is important to think about informing them. And as Madeline was sharing, how do you then think about some of the other steps involved, consulting them, involving them, collaborating them, etc. Wherever you're starting is fine, but just putting yourself on there and sort of understanding like what you can do and how you can do it is a helpful, I think, place to and sort of engage on this. And just a reminder that engagement is going to look different depending on where you're at. What you're doing with new construction or a rehab is going to look a lot different than as you go through lease up or, ongoing operations within the building. And each is going to have sort of different strategies associated with it. You can go to the next slide. It's a lot of text, but there's a couple of different things to think about. So first of all, if we're just informing, one thing that I'm always struck by is how little we all know about the utility bills that we get. So one of the things that I found that's been really helpful as we've been thinking through not just like how your energy bills are going to change, but how do you understand what that is? The Maryland Office of People's Counsel has resources, including videos, that will walk you through your bill and different charges that are on that and sort of what you can change by energy usage reductions and what you can't. And they have that for other utilities as well. So if you haven't done any engagement with your residents around anything regarding energy, this is a good place to start. Give them the information so that they can understand what they can impact and what they can't impact in their bills. The other thing that we've been hearing happening around the Maryland DMV area is there are some scams out there. And the Office of People's Counsel also has information around that. And what's nice is they have flyers in different languages. So if you have different populations within your buildings, they have different flyers, that sort of meets those folks where they're at. The other thing I want to mention here is the Safe Housing Stability Cohort. So several of our members, plus a couple of affordable housers, participated in that. It was not around energy and sustainability, but it was around how we communicate with residents, especially coming out of COVID, ensuring payment of rent so we can keep residents stably housed, when and how we make those communications, and how can we structure it in a way that builds trust and voice and opportunity to actually talk with residents versus them feel like they are being talked down to or cannot come and talk to property management. So a couple of the things that were highlighted in that is making sure you have really accessible language, no matter what you're sharing, that you're communicating with kindness and that you're considering barriers as you do this. And then the last thing on here is that we've developed a couple of fact sheets and tip sheets as you're going through the upgrades, as you're trying to educate around specific parts of the building, as you're potentially looking at working within community solar, that you can sort of think through how that looks like in practice and learn from others who have already done some of this work to begin with. Then let's go to the next slide. So let's say that you are looking to do more of this. We know that it actually takes time and effort on behalf of on-site property staff and sometimes corporate staff as well. So there are some resources out there, not a lot, but some. So specifically, there's the DOE Better Climate and Better Building Challenge, and they have partnered with HUD. And in this case, if you have a HUD insured or HUD assisted property that is part of your portfolio and you've joined this voluntary challenge, you can get access to additional management add-on fees per unit per month. It has to be HUD insured or HUD assisted, but you can get up to $4 per unit per month to support these activities. So if you're looking at doing benchmarking and you need some help around that, you can get some funding towards that. As you're doing this resident engagement work, you can get a little bit of funding towards that. And for those who are starting out, we have heard that this has been a useful way to get just a little bit of extra dollars that you can bucket towards doing that resident engagement strategy. And then we can go, I think, to my last slide. Um, Other ways in which you can look at some community engagement best practices. So HUD's Green and Resilient Retrofit program doesn't have a lot of examples of how to do this, but they do have requirements in their program about having meetings before and during construction, and then resources that they expect you to provide to residents for in-unit upgrades after the fact. So as these GRP awards wrap up, we're expecting to see some results that come out of it, including some best practices around how folks are doing that work, because they're all required to do it for the program. In addition, Enterprise Green Communities, if you haven't looked at that criteria lately, they have processes that you can utilize even if you're not participating in that green building certification program. They have it for both, like when you are starting out in design, how to engage residents, how to think through, different things to consider the culture and the audience, and all of that. And then they have a lot of resources for what to do once you complete that building. So how do you put together like an O&M package that and resources for residents as you wrap up a rehab or do a new construction. All of these things up here, are free, so they're accessible as you need them. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Lauren. Are there any questions for Lauren about the resources she shared, or any folks that have used those resources that want to share how that's been going? Okay, no worries. For now, we're going to hand it over to Kim and Christy with CHP, who are going to share their organization's experience with surveying residents to help inform their project scope of work.
Okay, we got it. Hi, I'm Christy McMichael. I head up the business intelligence team at Community Housing Partners. I'm going to start off today by giving some high-level information about CHP and our surveying processes. And then Kim Strom, our Vice President of Strategic Operations, will do a deeper dive into some specifics of a project we've done at one of our properties. Next slide, Kim.
I'm trying. Okay, there we go. There we go.
First, a little bit about CHP. Our organization focuses on low-income households throughout the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. We do that through our real estate development work, our weatherization work and building science training, property management, and all that entails for our portfolio of almost 100 properties and 6,000 units. And we have a home ownership department that does single family development and manages a land trust in the community around our home office in Christiansburg, Virginia. So although CHP has done plenty of surveying over the past 50 years, a little over 5 years ago, we became more intentional about our process with a goal toward better understanding our residents' experiences in our communities. We wanted to be sure we were asking the right questions and for the right reasons. So for example, when developing the annual survey that we piloted in 2021 and we still conduct today, I pulled together a committee that included representatives from the stakeholder departments, and I charged them to respond to this question. If you could ask our residents 5 questions, what would those be? And then I asked them to consider what they would do with the information. Then I took their responses, focused on the themes that I identified in them, along with what their goals were for those questions, and created the survey. The questions were further fine-tuned by the group until we felt we had a good product to deploy at the properties. When deploying the actual survey, our typical approach is to try to meet all the residents at a property where they are. Our VP of Resident Services coined this as the spray and pray approach. So we give residents the opportunity to answer the survey online. We have web links on flyers and emails through text messages. They can also complete a paper survey that's handed out at events. And during those events, we have staff on hand to help with an interview approach to giving feedback if that's preferred. We also distribute paper surveys by hanging a copy on every door at a property. The pilot of our annual survey in 2021 is what led to the 4th point on the slide. After surveying at our 8 pilot properties was complete, I put together beautiful reports and sent them to the on-site teams and their regionals and their asset managers. The information was welcome, but nothing really came out of those results, except for teaching us some surveying best practices, including the importance of the formal debrief and the need to share collected information back with the people that we surveyed. So the debrief is a critical piece of all of our surveying initiatives. And as far as what that looks like, in the case of our annual survey, representatives from 3 departments plus departmental and organizational leaders are involved in the meetings. I lead the presentation of the information and highlight key takeaways that I've identified in my review of the responses. I then let the stakeholders take the lead in the conversation that follows. And the prompt that kicks off that conversation is to ask the on-site staff who are present if the results track with their experiences or if there were things that were surprising. And their answer to that is typically enough to get everyone else engaged. Since implementing the debrief as part of our surveying process, we're seeing staff take actionable items from the survey results and collaborating to ensure our residents' feedback is actually used. The action items may be things that need to be addressed to improve the apartment community, but there can also be things that are helping a property excel that we might want to scale across our portfolio.
Submitting the patient code, but
Next slide, Kim. A specific example of a survey we did before undertaking a renovation was in 2022 at S.A. Robinson Apartments, located in the rural town of Pembroke, Virginia. The building was constructed in 1940 as a community school. CHP converted the building into apartments in 1985, and then nothing major had really been done to the property since that time. In anticipation of the planned renovation, our asset management department requested a survey be conducted. They wanted to determine the greatest need according to the residents so that they could check their own assumptions about that. The 14-question survey focused on the residents' happiness level with the comfort, safety, and performance of their home. We asked what they liked about it and what they wish they could change. We deployed the survey through emailed links and QR codes provided on flyers, and paper surveys placed on every door at the property. We kept that survey open for 2 weeks, and we had a response rate of 53%, which is pretty good. We always shoot for 30%. Every respondent received a $25 Walmart gift card. In conducting the survey, we also took the opportunity to find out more about how best to go about future engagement with those residents and to determine where they would prefer to spend their time during their apartments renovations. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and she can talk more about how this survey and its results were used in the work scope and funding of the project.
Thank you, Christy. Yeah, and so I do want to talk about kind of to go on what Christy was saying about the feedback actually being used. And so we had an opportunity around the same time that we were collecting that data and talking about the renovation work for S.A. Robinson. We were connected with a group called Soul Systems. Some of y'all might be familiar with them. But they're an independent power producer and they work with large companies, and then they use that production revenue to funnel back into what they call a impact grant, community-led impact grant. So we made this connection with them. We were actually talking to them about our community engagement and community resident surveying process, and it kind of, aligned. And so we were successful in receiving a $350,000 grant that really was leveraging the community and resident feedback that Christy and Asset Management had collected through the pre-renovation survey. So we took the money and we replaced all of the windows and all of the doors. Hopefully y'all saw on the survey, I'm sorry, I should have gone back to that, but that a vast majority of the residents on the survey talked about discomfort due to drafty windows, temperature fluctuations, and most folk, I think it was 7 or more, said they wanted new windows as the primary concern leading up to a renovation. And so we did that. We used that money. This picture here on the left are the new windows, on the right are the old windows. And you can see here we had a lot of success in terms of directly addressing the concerns of the residents. Our air infiltration reduction numbers were 83% for the windows and 88% for the doors. So really, really significant changes there. I've got a couple of photos here that honestly were for a different presentation, but I thought they were kind of cool. This is just the duct blaster testing that we did for both the windows. This is the before. You can see the baseline number there, and the after on a window in a unit. And then this is the before for the door, one of the external doors, and the after for one of the external doors. So you can see the process we went through to make sure that we were achieving the results that both we wanted as part of the renovation and that the residents had asked for. Then at the end of the project, we had a celebration, obviously including the residents. We had a barbecue and music. It was very festive. And on the right here is a woman named Adora who came down from DC. She's with Soul Systems, and we did like a video, and it was just really a nice event. And we would have been remiss not to do another community engagement initiative as part of that event. So not only did we invite the residents and engage with them, but we also invited a key local partner down. This is a very rural community, and they have Carilion Giles Community Hospital. And the woman on the right here came and did a lot of health screening and health providing information around health resources. That's Christy getting her blood pressure checked on the right. And we were trying to kind of position this as a holistic approach to health because of the vast improvements in indoor air quality that we had made through the renovation work. At that event, we also did another survey. This one was really focused on what kind of programming the residents would want moving forward after the renovations were complete. And so you can see here some of the questions. We shared these results, obviously, like Christy said, back with the residents, but also with our resident services team and the Carilion Giles Community Hospital, because they were really interested in doing some on-site programming. And I think they are doing some exercise programming and maybe even the feeding or cooking programming that was identified on the survey. And last but not least, we were able to leverage, so we leveraged the resident survey to be able to get the Soul Systems grant. And then we were able to use that as a catalyst for an additional resource development opportunity where we took this model that we had used at S.A. Robinson and pitched it for a DOE Buildings Up prize in 2023. Again, we were successful and we got $400,000 through that prize, and we used it to replace the roof at S.A. Robinson. So basically that spark that spark started with the resident survey, and then it resulted in $750,000 of investment into that community, into a rural property in a rural community where we don't typically have that level of resources for renovation work. So a pretty successful community engagement opportunity.
Thanks, Kim and Christy. That was awesome. Great to see the results from your surveys. Do folks have any questions for the CHP team? Either come off mute or put them in the chat.
I had a question.
Kim, hi, it's Joshua. Nice to see you again.
Likewise.
In the process of working with the residents, what was their feedback on the engagement process? Like, were they interested in providing feedback? Had they done it before and not had results like at other properties, or what was their response?
I would say they were very excited to talk to us, especially the one where we were there in person. There was an event going on. I camped out there from, I think I started at 10 a.m. and I stayed past 6 p.m., long past when the event was over, just to be sure to catch people coming home from work or coming home to grab dinner or whatever. And they did the survey, but then they sat and talked and talked and talked. And so they had a lot to share back. And one of their frustrations was in the past that people would show up saying that they wanted to hear what they had to say, but nobody followed through. So I think seeing our follow through in what we did at the property and also with the programming, and also I did the drawing for the programming survey. We gave them a gift card for a place right across the street from them. And so doing that right in front of all of them and them seeing this is real, this is happening, we are here. I think it helped tremendously.
A great story, very impressive.
Alex, I think you had a question as well. Oh, sorry, we can't hear you. No, do you want to put it in the chat? I had a quick question about the gift cards you all gave to residents. Was the funding for that just part of your resident services budget, or were you able to source funding?
Asset management, when they're doing the renovation, they build that into the budget for the project.
Got it. Any other questions? Yeah, Claudia.
Hi, thank you guys so much for sharing. It was a very cool story. Kind of similar to Josh's question. In actually getting responses for the survey initially, was there any difficulty in that, or just kind of doing the in-person and the email and the text, you kind of got enough responses? And I guess follow-up would be, how long did you give a window for people to respond to that survey?
So for the pre-renovation survey, it was a 2-week window. That one, we did not have any in-person component, but we still got over 50% response rate. I think we have found that having a single site is very helpful as far as getting survey responses. We found that engaging some community leaders to help get some responses going is also very helpful, but really just giving them a wide range of opportunities to fill out the survey has been the most beneficial approach that we've had. Different communities want to fill them out in different ways. We've had some where text message has been the most effective way, but then especially places like S.A. Robinson, where it's a single small community where their community is where they're hanging out and what they're doing, showing up on site, having even just a one-day thing, I think is just as effective as spreading it out over 2 weeks and sending text messages. So every property has its own personality, and figuring out how to tap into that personality is key.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one more, sorry. With the survey that you shared first, where they could pick which which upgrade they wanted the most for their property. Did you do education prior to that to walk through the different types of measures that might be involved in energy efficiency improvements, or was it just based on their experience living in that unit, what type of upgrades they thought would be most helpful?
Yeah, we intentionally didn't give them a menu. Asset management wanted them to think through it and not put anything in their minds that perhaps we wouldn't end up being able to do. That was another concern. So it's pretty amazing that new windows just kept showing up again and again and again when there was just a wide open text box for them to fill in whatever they wanted.
Oh, so they weren't picking from like it was truly
Nope.
just blank text. Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
It's great.
Now for the activities one, we did pick and we let resident services tell us what was possible. We didn't just leave that one wide open.
That makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kim and Christy. This was great. Now I'm going to hand it over to Hayden with New Ecology, who's going to share more of a resident perspective to clean energy retrofits.
Hey everyone. I'm Hayden Cantoni. I'm a HERS rater at New Ecology. And I think my presentation echoes a lot of the points already made and may demonstrate the importance of these resident surveys and resident-oriented programs like EGC. So I'm sharing a story from the field from a project I worked on called 116 Norfolk Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. A little bit about the project. It was originally built in 1907 as a convent, and in 1975 was bought by the Cambridge Housing Authority and converted into single room occupancy. So the residents had shared kitchen and bathroom facilities. Um, After years of use, the building and its facilities were in need of a major update. Multiple building components were showing their age or failing, including the heating system and the plumbing systems. So CHA conducted surveys of the current residents in the building to understand what they would like to see in the updated facility. And this feedback was taken into consideration when they designed the new building. So the property has now been expanded and fully redeveloped into 62 studio apartments, each one now with a private kitchen and bathroom. Um, and these studio apartments are for the existing residents that were already in the building. And if they move out, any openings are for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. So New Ecology was brought onto the project to handle the sustainability certification, which was Enterprise Green Communities. And as part of the EGC program, we are required to do a sustainability training with residents and property management to help them understand some of the new features of the building. So going into this training, it was myself and a colleague of mine. And we went into this training at the end of the project, hoping to inform residents about things like ventilation grills and why you shouldn't cover them up and make sure they're always running, how the heat pumps operate, how to use your thermostat, and when it makes sense to open or close your windows. But while we were conversing with one of the residents at this training, my colleague asked him what sustainability meant to him. And the answer we got was surprising in how different it was from our understanding of sustainability. To this resident, sustainability was much more about personal sustainability rather than reducing a carbon footprint. Um, so he told us how before moving into his apartment, he had lived in a shelter which had shared kitchens and bathrooms with many other residents, kind of similar to how this building was set up prior to the renovation. And this had like a major impact on how he was able to live his life, where people didn't have any ownership of the space, so they were constantly dirty. Bathrooms could be full, making him late to work. Like he wouldn't be able to shower before having to go to work. Um, so he now has his own kitchen and bathroom, which has made a huge difference in his daily life. He can take a shower without waiting in line, making it easier to get to work on time. and he can cook when he's hungry instead of relying on whatever food is available at a common kitchen. So he also spoke about the sense of ownership that comes with having his own space. Um, he keeps his space very tidy and really enjoys taking care of it. Um, he likes to clean up after himself and keep his own cleaning supplies. And he said that this control over his environment has made a huge difference in his daily life. So for this resident, sustainability isn't about checklists or certifications. It's more about having a stable, private place to live and the ability to meet his own needs. So what I took away from this interaction most was the importance of interacting with residents, the residents that we're impacting, and making sure we're putting their needs first. Through resident surveys prior to the renovation, the project team heard a lot about the downsides of the shared kitchen and bathroom situation. And by listening to residents before and after the project, we were able to understand and implement some of the most impactful changes to the building's end users.
Thanks, Hayden. That's an awesome story. Also, great project. Any questions for Hayden? I think it'd be interesting if you could share a bit more about the trainings and kind of like what were some of the takeaways residents have from learning how to use the new equipment in their units.
So we kind of got derailed during the training because only a couple of residents came down to actually speak with us. And the majority of the training ended up us just having a conversation with this one resident. Yeah.
Which I'm sure he enjoyed.
Yeah, yeah. And we enjoyed it too.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Any questions or comments folks have or their own perspective to resident engagement that they want to share? Yeah, Claudia.
Hello. I had a question, Hayden, because I've been doing similar trainings for folks, but about community solar for some of our buildings. And it's been really tough. I found that only a couple people will come to these events, even if it's a building where more people will come to other events. And I guess I'm just curious, Hayden, or if anyone has ideas on how to get people to come to like trainings, because I think even asking for feedback about something is different than training for like any of these energy efficiency measures or things like that. What people have done to have successful trainings for their properties.
Yeah, we've had success, not necessarily with trainings, but sometimes with testing where we need residents to come out of their units and maybe congregate somewhere. We've had success incentivizing this with um, like a free breakfast and making sure that the timing of it is such that people are awake or it's not too late in the day and that it coincides with times that people are going to be home and not at work.
With our DOEE project that I mentioned at the beginning, we paid residents to come to the small group discussions. That's obviously different than a training, but that financial incentive was helpful in getting folks in the door. If financial incentives aren't in the budget, I think sometimes incorporating trainings into like a larger community event, whether you have like National Night Out or just like a block party, and you can have various vendors like Kim and Christy mentioned their health partner. But you could have a table at those events for folks to do kind of one-on-one trainings or small group trainings throughout the evening or the afternoon. Um, Maybe those could be alternative ways to kind of get folks more involved. I don't know if anyone else has other perspectives.
I will say that one of the most useful tools I have as far as figuring out how to get residents to respond or show up is the on-site staff and asking them specifically what it is that motivates people. If they see more people when it's time to pay rent, plan something around the days where they're going to be streaming into the office to do that. So talking to that on-site staff is critical. Going back to every property has its own personality, so it's just pinpointing what that is.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions or comments for any of our presenters this morning? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, Kim, Christy, and Hayden. This was all really great information, and it's great to see all the great work that folks are doing at properties and engaging residents. As I mentioned at the beginning of our call, this is our last webinar as part of our webinar series. We're still moving forward with our Track 2 and Track 3 TA, so if you're participating in those, we'll continue to see you. But to help inform kind of what next steps make sense in terms of technical assistance, whether it's for BEPS or just energy efficiency and clean energy work in Maryland more broadly, we've put together a feedback survey that we'd love to get everyone's responses to. It's 5 short questions. And these results are also going to be shared with the Maryland Energy Administration to help inform resources that the Clean Buildings Hub will put together, whether it's peer exchange opportunities, infographics, fact sheets, trainings, virtual sessions, whatever it may be. Your responses here will be very helpful. But yeah, any other final questions or anything before we hop off a little early today? And this form will be available through the end of next week, so you don't have to answer it right away, and I'll include it in the follow-up email. Great. Well, thank you so much again, Lauren, Kim, Christy, and Hayden, for your presentations this morning. It's been great working with all of you this summer. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar series and participating in our program. And we will continue to share information via email as we figure out next steps for clean energy work in Maryland. Thanks all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.